Katz
Thank
join
you.
us today.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Bouchet, and we're going to be having a discussion today about a topic that I think is both very close to our entire lives and upbringings, which is notions of creativity, skateboarding,
Yeah.
neurology, entrepreneurial thinking.
Okay.
And so, just for everyone to know, Nick Katz is born and raised in Miami.
Yeah, you want me to do the intro for myself?
Sure.
Okay. My name's Nick Katz. Yes, I'm born and raised here in Miami. I am the owner of a skate brand, Andrew, located here in downtown Miami, just a few blocks down the road. And I'm the president of Skate Free, which is a nonprofit organization responsible for building skateboard parks here in South Florida, but hopefully in other places as well. And our main project is the Lot 11 skate park, which is Miami's first public concrete skate park. It's 50,000 square feet. It's pretty groundbreaking public space for the city. And we completed that in 2019.
I'd like to talk about the skate park and your involvement in the community.
Yes.
Why don't we start with that, actually, and then we can talk about what foregrounded all this.
Okay.
So, the skate park,
Yeah.
was this a sort of singular vision that you had? You were a skater here when you were younger and you realized this need for this?
Well, I grew up skating here. I started skating in 2000. I got my first board when I was 10 years old. And growing up for me, there was no skate parks. There was a couple of private ones that people had built in warehouses, and it was kind of pay to play. Your parents would drop you off. You'd paid $5, but there was no kind of infrastructure for public skate parks here in Miami specifically. Around the time I was 16, they started building these very shitty kind of they're called prefabricated skate parks that didn't really have any insight from real skateboarders in them. They were very far away. They were built on the outskirts of Miami-Dade County, and so it didn't really satisfy the need that us as skaters always had. I grew up street skating all of the streets of downtown Miami and this kind of area. As a kid, I used to take the bus to our main transit line, the Metro Rail, take the Metro Rail to downtown Miami, and it was kind of our playground as kids. And obviously that's not legal, so we would get chased by security guards and police officers, and we'd get our boards taken, and my parents would have to get them out of police lockup and stuff like that. So I always knew that there was a need. I didn't know that I was going to be the person to bring this thing to fruition. I think there was multiple people over the course of the time I've been skating that tried, but inevitably failed. In 2008, I moved to Long Beach, California. And when I moved to Long Beach, there was a group of pro skaters that I had looked up to from afar through skate videos and stuff, that they were deeded a small kind of paved 10,000 square foot piece of land at a local park called Cherry Park, located in Long Beach, kind of in the heart of Long Beach. And they took it upon themselves to invest their own money to build these small little obstacles. So it was really ledges and manual pads, and I know for the layman that you don't know what those are, but very kind of crude, small obstacles that you would find in the streets. And I just remember skating those things, and I remember showing up at the park and it would be packed. It became this kind of epicenter of skating in Long Beach, and all of these pro skaters that I looked up to, that I was having my first experiences with, were showing up there, and I would do a trick on a ledge or something, and I'd hear like a tail clap, which in skating is kind of the like pat on the back equivalent. And I'd turn around and it'd be like Jeff Rowley. And for those who watch this later, he was in Tony Hawk Pro Skater. He's one of probably the like best known skaters of all time. Had a great, incredible run in the sport, and I just would be mind blown by that. And it kind of recontextualized for me like what was important. It was really about space and just like the bare minimum. And so I started realizing that this type of project was called like do-it-yourself skate parks. They were called DIYs. And so in 2010, I left California and I moved back to Miami. And I was working at a nightclub, and that nightclub had a park project on the site of the old Miami basketball arena. It was across the street. They had gotten some city money to basically build a passive park for the community in that area, and it just occurred to me like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me to do this thing that I saw in LA. And so at the time I was in art school, and my professor had shown me work by an artist named Theaster Gates, and that really opened my mind in a way to the fact that placemaking could be considered art. He has a big art practice. I mean, paintings and sculptures and pottery and all of these things. But what I was really fascinated by was the fact that he was taking these dilapidated buildings in the south side of Chicago where he was from, and under the premise that like these inner city neighborhoods deserved these cultural spaces that weren't being provided by the city. So he built a theater, he built a listening room, he built an archive, and I don't know, when I saw that I was like, okay, I approached my teacher and we had these assignments kind of for our thesis, and I said, well, could this skate park project be kind of my extension of what Theaster is doing in Chicago, but in Miami and in kind of my own way, where his is focused on placemaking for the purpose of culture, not culture with two.
Sure.
But for
local community in a different sense, not so sport
I mean like the tenets of culture. So art, literature, film, those things.
Yeah.
Could I do the same thing for skateboarding and it be adjacent to that, inspired by that, and in a way at least be considered art for the purpose of my classes? And so she gave me the green light, and I went to my bosses at the nightclub that were involved in this park, and I said, hey, your guys' park really doesn't have a lot of critical mass. It's so passive, there's not a lot of people coming here. I want this thing to be perceived as a success for you. Is there a way that I can do this project? So I laid it out for them, and we did it very cheaply. And within like a few days, it just exploded. And it was just inundated with kids like 24/7.
And this was the DIY project that you had made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was called Grand Central Park, and it was so popular. It was like kids were like basically living there. I mean, we had built like a mini ramp, and these kids were like living under the mini ramp. I mean, people were coming from all parts of like Florida. People were driving down from Atlanta, and it built this community this like gathering place for the first time ever. And by that point I had been skating for 18 years. I'd been skating for about 10 years, 10, 11 years. So in that 10, 11 year span, there was no place like that. That was free. It was outside. It was close to public transit. It had all the tenets to make it successful. And that project really kind of piqued my interest in maybe the possibility of a real project being viable. I started meeting all these political people within the Miami political sphere. All these articles had come out in the Miami Herald about our project. Photographers were coming to shoot it, and I saw this kind of like tourism need for it. Like we would get people that were coming off the cruise ships and coming over to shoot the skateboarders, and it was things that I had seen in Venice, California when I went to the park there, and I don't know. I said with no experience, like, all right, how do you do something like this? So I bought the book Nonprofit for Dummies, and it's a true story. I bought Nonprofit for Dummies, and we hired an accountant. And the first thing was like you had to build a board of people that were, one was an expert in the thing that was your mission statement. So I had a friend, Danny Fuenzalida. He was a pro skater. I thought he could give the project legitimacy. And the other one was to find probably like a local businessman that was like had good community goodwill. Danny at the time was teaching a young boy named Zion F's, who was like at the time I think 4-year-old child, and his dad was a guy named Richie F's, or is a guy named Richie F's, and Richie owned a very popular restaurant that a lot of political people in Miami had frequented. So I decided that the three of us could incorporate this small board, and we could start going after it. And so there's a lot in between there, but between 2012 and 2019, we incorporated, we got our EIN number, our nonprofit status with the state of Florida and the United States government, and we began kind of the process of figuring out how to build a skate park, which was, one, you had to find the space, and then two was you had to get the permission, and three was you had to get the money, and four was you had to create the design, and five was you had to build it. And so along that 7.5-year span, there was a tremendous 8 years span. There was a tons of ups and downs, and probably thousands and thousands of no's. But in 2019, we were able to kind of put all the pieces together. We raised $2 million, and we built what I think now is probably the best skate park in America. We've had everybody from the Olympic gold medalists, Nyjah Houston, Shane O'Neill, Paul Rodriguez. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Corey Junot was there yesterday, is that right?
Corey Junot was there yesterday. We've had, like, I don't even know, the roster of skaters is like a NBA All-Star team that have come and unsolicited, like, posted on their Instagrams their thoughts on the park, and it's just been like rave reviews. But my thing is like, if I'm gonna do this and it's gonna take me this long, like, I'm gonna shoot for the stars, and I'm gonna build the best park I can possibly conceive. Because originally the budget was much smaller, and the space was so large. It's about a city acre, 50,000 square feet. I'm good. Okay. And so I decided that, man, fuck it. Like, let's shoot for the moon. Like, let's literally build that. So in a way, if you go and you come to Lot 11 ever in the future, it's really 5 skate parks in one. Well, 4.
When I look online at the images and the footage, it's like I can't even wrap my head around like how many aspects. There's pools. There's like everything there.
Yeah. And for me, it was a passion project. I was able to like incorporate a ton of street spots, some that were lost completely to just construction and demolition.
So there was the recreation of earlier spots that you had sort of recreated
exactly.
in there?
Most of them from Miami. Most of them from Miami. Of like super iconic things that, like, if you're in skateboarding, in street skateboarding, you know it's what screams the city to you. Like, in a way, it would be like what these monuments, like the Eiffel Tower or the Statue of Liberty, mean to Paris and New York. In skating, there are those things, like, on a kind of a subcultural level, that are just small pieces of normal architecture, but that become so iconic to the cities that they reside in. And so we tried to recreate those things within the park, and they're kind of interlaced between the design.
Like China banks,
exactly.
something like this. Yeah.
So we actually did a replica of the Brooklyn banks, which is a very famous spot, which are now the Biscayne banks. Okay. Shout out to Miami. But We did the Triangle, which is a very famous spot here in Miami. The Jew rails, which was the rails at a local synagogue that have probably been featured on Thrasher magazine's like cover probably 10 times. They were made of like coral rock and these kind of they're called the 836 quarter pipes we redid. And then I brought in some influence from cities that I had traveled to and spots that I really loved. So there's actually a replica of a spot called République in Paris in the skate park. It's been kind of recontextualized in a way to kind of fit the design of the park. And then 2 other spots from Paris and 1 spot from Barcelona.
Okay, so there's actually this assemblage.
Yeah, there's an assemblage of different things and different kind of like architectural influences that make up the rest of the park, yeah.
Can we, there's so much to sort of like directions to go with this.
Yeah, that's
like
a lot.
In terms of cultural centers, urban culture, reclaiming or urban space for culture, historical recreations.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier about art school,
Yes.
creativity.
Yes.
Where I'm a professor, it's interesting because whenever someone's applying to the school, as soon as someone says, oh, they're a skateboarder, the entire committee goes, oh, we'll take them.
Really?
It's like a given that they're going to be interesting, challenging themselves, hardworking, dedicated, and they're going to be on their way.
I mean, I think as somebody who's skated for 20 years now, 20 plus years, 22 years. I'm still very young. I'm only 30 years old. So, I think that what skateboarding teaches you, I don't know. I think there's an intrinsic value to skateboarding in the way that it trains your mind. I think that it is inherently creative because there's no rule book. Just like any sport is inherently creative. I'm a huge basketball fan. You know, Dwayne Wade, Kobe Bryant, a lot of these shooting guards that are like my favorite athletes in basketball. There's a style and a creativity to how they approach a defense, right? There's a similarity in that to skateboarding and how you approach the obstacles that are in front of you. It's kind of up to you creatively to make those decisions, and that's, I think, what speaks to us as skaters. It's like when we watch somebody skate part, it's how they put the tricks together. It's their choices that they make that resonate inside of our brains and like make us enjoy their...
I think it's also been an interesting aspect of this, which you were saying earlier. You did a trick, Jeff Raleigh tapped his board because it was about you doing something at your style, your thing.
Exactly.
You know? So
it's about a few things. So it's about like technique, it's about difficulty, and it's about style. And it's like you have to be able to discern those things all at once, and that's how you interpret it in real time. So like when you're saying like you as like in the admissions department when they see skaters and they say, oh, this dude's gonna have these tenets of his personality. I mean, I wouldn't think that. I find that to be really sick and dope that you guys think that way.
I'm actually the only one who doesn't.
Okay.
I'm always like, hold on, let's look deeper.
Yeah, I think that.
But for everyone else who they don't even know I skate still or that I had been a skater, but it's like a kind of, they see it from the outside, even.
Well, I think there's similarities in the way that. And this is speaking from the perspective of somebody who went to art school, who has a BFA, who went through like the gauntlet of that process, and I do see the similarities that you're describing. I think that like the persistence of being that you begin to understand in skateboarding, like going after a trick over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, with the only benefit to you is like the personal, it's like the rolling away. That's like the big gift at the end of the process. I find that to be similar to art making because in a way, to be an artist, you have to be kind of compulsively creative. You have to be able to conjure up the kind of desire within yourself to constantly be challenge yourself artistically and be making things. And I was telling you earlier that when I went to school, I knew on the first day of class, I went to a school called New World School of the Arts, and we had to do this thing that was called Warp. And I think it was, and Warp was kind of like a boot camp. So they put you through this intensive your first semester, and if you survive the intensive, then you can continue the program. But if you don't survive or you give up, then they kick you out and you lose everything.
This is like organic chemistry for art school.
Kind of. Yeah. It was kind of insane, and it's this weird thing where they're like, all right, you have to do 150 paintings by the end of the week. And you're like, what? And you have to do them, and if you don't do them, if you have like a grade below a C or something, they like just kick you out of school. And you're done. There's no coming back. You have to reapply, you have to go back through Warp, this whole thing. So I remember showing up, I'm like, fuck, dude, I gotta do, like, what?
But I think, what I signed up for.
But I think that the skating had, I'm definitely like a persistent person, and I don't give up on anything. It's like one kind of tenet of my personality. And so like failure for me in this class was not an option. I was like, by all means necessary, I'm gonna get to the next round. But I do remember thinking to myself, I don't think that this is my future. Because I was surrounded by so many talented people that I think had that like, that it factor that maybe I didn't believe I had within myself. So I made it through this gauntlet process, and then on to 4 more years of art study, and just being surrounded by so many of those people was unbelievable. But I did notice a through line. The really successful people that I gravitated towards, especially their work, these people were compulsive. They had like a studio practice. I have crazy ADD. Like there's no way you can lock me in a room to like paint for hours. It's just not gonna happen. I'm gonna go. I was never in my studio. I was always in my like friend's studio bothering them, like just talking and stuff, and really kind of making work just to like make it through and on to the next thing. But the one thing that I was compulsive about was this project, and I thought that that's maybe I'm an artist in a different way, I guess, but
I think this gets into all these bigger questions about what's the difference. What is art? What is creativity? What is? I think there's general acknowledgement now that, for instance, in the '60s there was this sort of attempt at like, can someone live as an artist 24/7, 365? Can you just call your whole life art?
Is that like Joseph Beuys and?
Yeah, and part of Fluxus, and I think even within themselves they quickly acknowledge it's not really possible. You sort of need to step back to look back on it. And then this idea of like, well, there's actually creative living, and that can go 24/7, 365. It's not so much about representation, it's about, it gets back to this also more recent idea in art, which is, it's the end of isms. There's no more cubism, minimalism.
Yeah.
It's all about individual methodology. So this, again, getting back to skateboarding, it's about each person's individual style, their own approach to things. But I'm always sort of beating this drum about the value of an art education. I think is actually more important and more worthwhile than ever. As absurd as it might sound, because there's so many people studying art, but it has to do with this approach to life in the same way that studying philosophy might be more important now than it has been in the last 200 years.
I think there's a lot of value in that statement, because as a business owner and somebody who, I own a clothing brand, so 99% of my business is an art business, and I find that in our business we have a big art problem, like finding creative people, that can create output creatively. And I think that there is a lot of truth in that statement, that going to art school today is very important, because I think that because of the way that the world works now and everything is based on content creation, we're being stimulated at all times, and there has to be some creator of that behind the scenes. Obviously now there's things like Midjourney and all of these like AI generating softwares and stuff that you can kind of just plug prompts into, but they're not so advanced that they can take over the human mind at now. And I think that like Meta, Twitter,
that's their goal.
No, but I know, but you have to think, to create the metaverse, you're going to need armies and armies and armies of artists. Maybe not your painters and your sculptors and your traditional artists, but digital artists, graphic artists, people that can create the look, the feel, the experience of any business nowadays. And so I think there is a big, there should be a large focus on a lot of creative students coming out of high school and stuff, thinking about going into these institutions, because I think that there's going to be a lot of money and windfall for them long term, because every company from here on out is going to be gobbling up the artistic talent and competing for it.
I think it's
around
a really
the world.
interesting. Like I know some neurologists who approached me in the last few years, because there seems to be a real big interest in where's creativity coming from, and it's sort of the same questions start off like they're monitoring people's brains while they're working on something, when they're in the zone, and I'm trying to explain to them it's not so easy to unpack this. Why are you even looking? Why do you have an interest in decoding creativity? And one of them is this woman, Isabella Pasqualini, who's an architect. Now she's a doctor of neurology. And she said, actually, the interesting thing is they find that where creativity lives in the brain is overlapped with where deviancy lives.
Okay.
And then I thought, that's really interesting, and that somehow gets back to skateboard culture.
Yeah.
Which is the notion of deviancy.
Yeah.
There's something illegal about the sport. And then a cultural reaction within skateboarding, which is about adopting, like taking power forms, existing corporate structures, and reinterpreting them and sort of like flipping them on their end and taking ownership.
Yeah.
Is that something you could elaborate on with just like the whole sort of cultural aspect of not necessarily deviancy, but a kind of, how do you put it, like reactionist?
Well, I'll say this. I think that I think that we live in a society now where subcultures are dying out one by one by one. Like the subversive subcultures of years ago that made things quote unquote cool are dying because of the accessibility of everything through social media. Like back in the day, you never had access to celebrities, right? Like if Mick Jagger, you only saw him in photographs that were taken by photographers.
It was the dream of Mick Jagger.
That's what I mean. It's like you had to be there. Yeah. Like you had to like see him walk out of Studio 54 and be like, holy shit, with like some hot ass chick, and be like, holy shit, that happened. You know, whereas now every aspect of that is being curated and like fed to you through a computer that's essentially at this point like embedded in your body, as close to your brain as it could possibly get.
Your brain
right?
or your genitals.
Yes. So I think with like the death of cool and I think that skateboarding in a weird way has persisted on, because it's one subculture that you can't just you can't fake it. Fashion, you can buy Rick Owens, and you can go with Rick Owens head to toe and show up at a fashion event, and like people are gonna be like, oh, this dude's like a fashion guy. But you can't show up to a skate park like dressed in the costume of a skater and get any respect from the community of skaters. Because the second they sniff you out as a poser, you're done. They're gonna like shoo you out of the arena, because it's one of those things that you have to do it in order to be a part of it. And I think now more than ever, you can just put on the costume of whatever you want to be a part of. You know, you can be perceived as being whatever you want in this world, because you can take photographs of it, you can curate a page around it. But if you don't have the sauce in skating, you won't be accepted by the by the larger population.
I agree, and I noticed too that it's not even like the sauce is actually quite simple, which is a legitimate interest in something. Like
100%. I don't think skaters.
You don't need to be very good, but you don't have to be.
There's a joke in
skateboarding.
skateboarding. If you suck at skateboarding, just film it. You know?
Yeah.
And that's what happens. I don't know if you guys ever watched Rocket Power. Did you guys watch that show?
Yeah.
All right. Remember Squid? Yeah. He was like the chubby kid who wasn't good, but they were like, all right, dude, fucking here's the camera. Like, film us. We're dope at this stuff. But he was part of the crew. Yeah. And he got all of the he got all of the sauce, he got all of the accolades of the culture, because he's embedded in it and there's a need for him to exist within it. The last 5 years I've produced with my with our creative content creator Justin, pretty much all the videos we've made over the last 5 years for Andrew.
And you're filming these?
I'm filming them, yeah.
So you're a filmmaker as well?
Yeah, so I'm filming them. But there's something about being in the streets with these guys and having to follow them around with, it's like being in the trenches, you know? Like if getting the trick is the war, you're there with the guys. And so there's kind of a bond there, because you have to trust each other in a lot of ways, because choreographing, filming somebody with a fisheye lens I do a lot of talking with the skaters first, hey, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna swoop by your back foot this way, then I'm gonna cut back over. We kind of choreograph it, and I say, don't worry, I got it. You don't have to worry, just focus on what you're doing. But there's kind of a dance going on between the two of us in that process, and I think, you have to do it to be a part of it, and I think that's what keeps skating infinitely authentic, even when it gets corny, because it can get corny. There are some corny ass skaters out there, and the commodification of it can get corny, but still at the end of the day, even the wackest dudes in the sport, we're all still kind of a community that if it came down to it, we're gonna rally around each other.
It's a really interesting thing, actually, because skateboarding is still not the subculture it was, I think, when we were younger, where it was really a small community. It's grown a lot, of course.
Oh, yeah.
But it still somehow remains kind of, I don't want to call it an outsider status, but it's still,
for sure.
It has some aspect of this. It's outside. And I think this is also part of the artistic aspect, which is you're in a certain culture, but you're not
outside of society. Yeah,
you're sort of 1 foot out and 1 foot in.
Well, you were talking about creativity overlapping with deviance, and so I think there's an attitude that makes skateboarding so appealing, because it's anti-establishment. It's like a fuck cops attitude. It's kind of a destruction by all means. There's no regard for the whatever laws. Street skating, it's funny growing up. You get caught street skating and cops are like, what why are you doing this? Yeah. And well, the point I used to always make was, I was like, yo, there's no fucking skate park, so build us a goddamn skate park and we'll go, which we ended up being a part of. But I used to say, imagine, I would just be like this, imagine there was hoops for whatever reason, artistic, some architect was like, I want to put basketball hoops on the side of every building that I build. Don't you think dudes are gonna if there was no basketball courts,
Yeah.
people would be like, yo, there's basketball court. There's a fucking like hoop there. I think we could shoot a ball through. Like, people would be having like pickup games while like bankers are walking out of the building, right? And so for us, that's kind of what I would explain. There's every element of what's necessary for us to do what we want to do is here. And it's us being able to react in a way to the architecture, the intention of this architect.
That's a really interesting thing where the relationship to urban architecture from skateboarders, which is this thing about you were interpreting, like you're walking through and you're like, oh, actually I can use that. And there's a really great...
Oh, no, it's a disease. It's a fucking...
It is a disease.
No.
It is you're right. It's super interesting.
It is a straight up disease.
There's this really...
I go to any city and I'm like...
And you're scanning the landscape. You're in a car driving and you're kind of like, oh, look at the slope of that, or, you know.
No, or I'll like go to like a handrail in like LA and she's like, why are we here? I'm like, this is Hollywood 16. Are you out of your mind? She's like, what? Like, we're looking at some dumb rail?
Yeah.
I'm like, dumb to you.
There's so Georges Bataille was a...
I'm not familiar.
French philosopher, writer, and...
Not much philosophy in this noggin of mine.
But he had this great concept that I really like, which is that he believed that the evolution of man went from, you know, single cell coming out of the ocean through primate up into man, and that the evolution continued into monumental architecture.
Okay.
And that it gives us a feeling of dread, and that monumental architecture has a power over us that we're somehow implicated in, because we've actually created these masters, and that maybe we didn't personally create them, but that those monumental architecture has a sort of power over us. And I always felt this was some part of skateboarding to me too. It was about reclaiming and about utilizing this. Whether you agree with his principle or not, but I think that there's something to that. It's about like on a deeper level, a kind of fuck you, like.
Well, yeah, and this is what I was telling you earlier. There's two options in skating. You either skate or you die. You know what I mean? So we only have two options once we choose this life. And that's kind of, it's weird, but I think that it goes back to this idea about compulsion. Skaters are very compulsive. There's something inside of them that makes it, and it could be the adrenaline, it could be a myriad of things, but it's the thing that drives them to get up every morning. I have a compulsion for it. Like I say, and I think it's for anybody. People that like to work out, people like to play ball, it's really fun, it's fast, it engages your mind, and especially in today's world, like there's very few activities that I think you can do where you can just abandon your phone or technology for an entire span of time, because it's so it requires so much concentration and like understanding of your body and space that you don't really have time to like even deal with that.
And there's sort of
shit.
endless variations as well. It's like chess games. You can learn every single trick that's ever been thought of, and then you can relearn it all standing in the opposite direction.
You can put them all together.
Yeah, it's like an endless combination of working, and of course this also relates directly to art practices. You know, they're so intermingled. This way of thinking.
Now you can. Yeah, there's so much integration of different mediums. Like you see, I feel like what I've seen is I throughout time, I think artists were very one-laned in the way that they created. And now, it's funny because it's like a big joke, but the idea of like the multidisciplinary artist, which is like, it's like in everybody's...
catchphrase. Yeah.
Well, no, it's in like everybody's Instagram bio, like multidisciplinary artist or whatever, which means like I'm an actor and a model and a...
I love this about America, actually.
Yeah. Like the multi-hyphenated person. I think that now art can be anything. You you can delve into so many different mediums now and create a kind of a prolific body of work by just working in everything. It could be photography, because it's right here. It's all right here. You can make a movie with this. You can shoot photographs that can be up-res to, like billboard size. You can
Publish a book.
You could publish a book. You can
Yeah.
You can draw. Have you ever seen this shit Procreate, the app? It's insane. You can make like sellable pieces of art with it off your phone. So I feel like now there's tools. The traditional style of making art is in a way kind of irrelevant. You can do anything you want to do. And in a way that goes back to skating. It's like a complete freedom to do whatever is in your mind, whatever's in your heart. You can make it happen.
There's also, what was it, the Pet Shop Boys said, what they really liked about pop music was it was defined by its limitations.
Okay.
That's one aspect of, there's a purity that goes with certain sports, and it's about a kind of individual approach to one thing, and there's limitations like gravity and the certain geometry of this object you're with. I guess
I just say that's what makes no sense about Kyrie Irving being a flat earther. He plays basketball with a sphere. His career is about like holding a sphere. And that's always boggled my mind. But that's just
Yeah, actually, that's pretty great if you think about these inherent contradictions.
You were saying that. Hold on, go back to your first part.
Well, again, it just gets back to like a certain type of thinking that comes out of a particular culture and activity. I do think that these ideas about individual methodology, before we finish, I think it would be really, you explained earlier to me about the start of your project with the skate park to the end of it,
yeah.
And how, it was this 7-year, 8-year process. But within that, all these other things came out of it. A skate shop, brand, also like a huge community, not just a place for a community, but a whole culture of persons, people, creative people, a kind of like a whole world came out of this process from start to finish. Could you speak about that a little bit?
Well, in a way, it kind of built upon itself. So, Grand Central, that project that I spoke about earlier in this process, it started. That was kind of like the egg. That was like the Tamagotchi, like the egg hatched, and then it was bought by developers and it was raised. It was destroyed. And so I kind of went into a separate project, which was we worked with Red Bull, and we built this like DIY park that only lasted like a few months basically, and it was in a way it was kind of the precursor to what would become Lot 11. It was under an FDOT overpass. We worked with the FDOT. We got permission to do it. After that was then raised, actually, to make way for like staging material for the FDOT.
Got it.
I was given, Thrasher magazine came to Miami in, I can't remember the year, but they built kind of this like art skate park project in Wynwood, and we were a part of like manifesting that project to fruition. And so that happened, and that was around for maybe a few months. Then the same guys that I built Grand Central skate park with, they were doing a separate park project on this like eminent domained land, another temporary park project similar to the one that they had done before. They wanted another skate park. So we took the ramps that were paid for by Thrasher and Juxtaposed magazine, we like recontextualized them and built a new park. So throughout the process, I was always like trying to be like, all right, I have to always be sustaining this place for skateboarding, no matter what. So that was kind of like the constant mission. And while behind the scenes, I was really kind of trying to figure out, how do you do this? And I mean, it was, I don't know, it was a crazy. I didn't think I was gonna face so much adversity in the process. I remember going to talk to people. I was like, "There's gonna be a place for kids and families to like gather and practice this sport." Be like, "Yeah, fuck that." What? I was like, "This sounds so good on paper. What do you mean?" And
those are just things they needed to hear. Was that it?
Well, I mean, it was just, it was a lot. It was a tremendous amount of no's that after a while, you know, it gets very defeating, you know, but for whatever reason, and I cannot explain it, for whatever reason, I had a belief inside of me that no matter what, if I just like stuck with it long enough, the domino was gonna fall. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that meme on Instagram. It's like it's like a guy, he's like a 49er. He's like inside of a cave, and he's like dug a big hole, and he's in a cave. And on the other side of the cave, there's like a thin little piece of rock left. And on the other side, there's like a chamber of diamonds, but the guy's like walking away from it because he gave up, and the thing's like never give up. It could be right there on the other side. I swear to God, that meme was like embedded in my brain. I was like, am I this, like, I just was like, I gotta keep pushing, because maybe I'm this close to breaking through and like making this thing happen. Like I'm gonna meet the right person, or the right politician is gonna green light me, or whatever. I basically was able to position the project where it was ready to go, to the point where it was so ready to go, but the only obstacle standing in our way was the funding. Once we got to that place, that's where I kind of had to just keep grinding. And in a way, I make it akin to, and I think that this is probably evident in people's careers too, like even as an artist, I'm sure.
I was going to say, this, what you've just explained right now, I've heard from so many artists.
Oh yeah, it's a grind. I mean, it's
artists who've really had to, like, they open the door, they push certain boundaries, and it was just like this.
My wife's an actor. My wife's an actor. I shoot all of her self-tapes, and I do like the voice on the other side, and I like read all the other lines, and we edit them down, and I direct it, and then we send it out to the casting agents, and it's similar, because she'll get so close, she'll get like a callback, she'll get a role, she'll get booked, or she'll get what's called an avail, where they like pin you for a role, and so it really means you're like between three people. Then they make you wait, and then they just don't ever call you back, and then you're just like, oh, I guess I didn't get that one.
It's a tough process.
And I can't imagine how defeating that is. And what I tell her is through my experience, what I tried to do is I tried to like turn myself in a weird way into like a trash compactor, where I took the no's, I took the negativity, and I just buried it as deep inside of myself as I could, and just didn't think about it. I became almost in a weird way like impervious to no being an answer, or even caring. It was kind of like, okay, you don't fuck with this? All right, later.
I think it's the not caring.
I'm gonna have to find somebody else to listen to me, or to try to understand what I'm trying to do. And I mean, shout out to my parents, to my friends, to my partners, to the City of Miami Commission for believing in me and understanding the importance of it. Mayor Suarez, who at the time was Commissioner Suarez, and who was actually one of my first, he like actually got it. I remember going into his office and explaining to him what I was trying to do and all the hurdles we had already been over. And he had just come back from, I think, Portugal. And his son, they stayed in a hotel like across the street from a skate park, like on the Malecon there, like on the coastal wall. And every day the kids would look out the window and watch the kids skate. And so whatever, that personal experience kind of changed his perspective on what skateboarding could be. And I remember him saying, like, I think Miami needs this type of project. And he really helped me wrangle the rest of the people on the dais into ultimately supporting us. And
it's actually crazy.
He's a
to
dope
think the
dude.
city-
I know he's like kind of controversial now. Not controversial, but like, you know, people either love him or hate him. But
It's politics.
yeah, it's like crypto shit. I don't know. You know,
But it's
Miami's
crazy to
like-
think a city the size of Miami didn't have a park 20 years ago.
I know, it's insane. It's insane.
The other thing too, I think, which is same with
It's also insane that Miami Beach doesn't have a skate park. And we've been trying to do it like right there at Loomis Park on the sand. I think it would be one of the biggest tourist attractions for Miami Beach. And it's such a no-brainer for them. And I've gone to this City of Commerce. I've gone to the commission office. I've spoken to the mayor of Miami Beach. I don't know what their problem is. We have the successful model for them to follow just across the causeway. Just saying, if you're watching, I'm ready.
I think it's like with most things like this. Now that it's here, you can't imagine that it wasn't here.
Oh yeah, and
You know?
and I've seen the community explode. I've seen the talent explode. I mean, Zion F's my partner's son. He right now is at qualifiers for the Paris Olympics. There would be no way in hell that would be possible 10 years ago when it was just street skating here. There was no training ground. There's nowhere that people could hone their skills and become that good. And also my thing was I had to build every type of terrain. It had to be like bowls, it had to be street, it had to be park style, like big stairs, big rails, ledges. I had to do it all because I needed to expose the kids here to every single type of skating. And that in a way is going back to that like multidiscipline artist theory. Nowadays, most skaters can skate everything. They're called all-terrain vehicles. That's what you call like a guy who can skate everything.
Yeah.
Like a Nishad Ware or Louis Lopez. These guys, they can skate everything at like an extremely high level. Mostly they're street skaters, but they can do everything. And I think that Lot 11 is a perfect place for kids from the Miami community to kind of become that. And it was so, I think we've never had a center of pride as far as like, this dude is from Miami and he like went on to become a pro skater. And we have one, his name is Brian Della Torre. He had to leave Miami, move to San Francisco, like make it in California in order to like push his career to the next level. And I think now with like what we've contributed with Andrew and with Lot 11 and the industry that we're building down here, I think you could probably live here and be a part of the larger industry and be a pro and be traveling and get paid to
Not
do
have
this.
to move to California
You could just travel to LA when you need to or New York when you need to, but you can stay here because we've built a culture now.
Yeah.
And the talent I think is coming, and I think I can't imagine, I mean, Florida's produced a lot of great skaters in the last few years. Bunch of Skaters of the Year, Thrasher Magazine Skaters of the Year. And I think that Lot 11 and the culture that's being built down here in South Florida is going to be like, you're going to see a lot more of it because of that. And it's
Because of you.
No. It's because of a lot of people, but
Yeah.
it's
But I think that's just.
but that
it.
was my goal.
Yeah.
I mean, it was part of my thesis, you know, that we could do this. We could raise the bar for skating. Skating's the most important thing that's ever happened to me, other than my wife. Shout out to Tiffany, who's not here, but it truly is. It's the most important thing. It has taught me literally everything. It's given me the tenets of my personality that I think make me successful. I learned from this like piece of wood with 4 wheels on it. And I think the community, the creativity, the persistence, the things that are teachable within it. And that's why I encourage like anybody who has kids to let them skate. Because you kind of are like thrown to the wolves in a way. and you have to learn how to assimilate with a culture that's like not yours right away. Be
I totally agree.
okay.
My kids.
I gotta
skate,
wrap
so-
it up for
yeah.
my homie over there.
Anyone have any questions? First of all, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks,
Especially
guys.
you in the back walking through. Thank you for those claps. Does anyone have any questions?
Ask me a question, dude.
Totally unrelated.
You told me to wrap it up. You better ask me a goddamn question.
Did he give you this one here? Like.
Yeah, he
gotta
did.
go?
He was like,
All right.
he hit
Hey.
the wrap it up button from the Chappelle show.
Thank you, Nick, for coming to speak with me.
Dude, thank you.
Thank
for
you, Emily,
letting me
for
ramble.
organizing the talk.
I'm
Thank you,
hungover.
Nada. Thank you, City of Miami. Yeah.